All right, folks. Now, before we get started, I'd like to clarify that I am categorically opposed to all forms of political violence. Political violence is wrong, but self-defense is good. Let's talk about that. Counter arguments video, punch a Nazi. Are we for it? Are we against it? Let's find out together.
During the inauguration of Donald Trump on January 20th, 2017, a fellow by the name of Richard Spencer was punched in the face. A fellow by the name of Richard Spencer was punched in the face.
Sorry, there's nothing funny about violence.
The reaction to this was mixed. Some people condemned it, some people approved of it, and some people went one further, believing that this sort of behavior should be the rule of thumb, that this was justified because Mr. Spencer is a Nazi.
This is just your daily reminder that it's totally fine to punch Nazis.
If you see a Nazi, punch a Nazi.
Basic rules of America, you know, it's all right to punch a Nazi, right? Like, there's no need for critical discourse of it. There's no need to have a nuanced discussion. Can we punch a Nazi?
Spencer didn't have his wig split for having an opinion. He got decked for being a literal Nazi.
I was muted, my apologies. It should be noted, of course, that being a Nazi is technically, literally, an opinion, so a little bit reductive there, but nonetheless, we should ask ourselves, why is it okay to punch a Nazi? Or I should ask, why do these people think it's okay to punch a Nazi? Well, the reason for that isn't because these people have strong political disagreements. It's not the act of disagreement itself that is causing people to act this way. I have had severe political disagreements with a great many people, and I did not feel any urge or moral impetus to punch them, nor, I imagine, would these people have defended me if I had chosen to punch them. So, it's not the fact that there's a political disagreement that sort of separates this, that distinguishes this particular category. The reason why these people are saying that it is okay to punch a Nazi is because they are advocating for self-defense. You see, Nazis, as we've discussed in this channel before, they aren't your... See, they don't really believe in things like free speech, democracy, electoralism, or human rights. That's not an exaggeration. They literally don't. Those just aren't things that they care about that much. You can find them talking about it. They don't care. Well, they care about human rights for specific groups of people, and even then, only some human rights. I doubt they would allow you to protest the government, for example, even if you are a white, cisgender, straight man. But nonetheless, these things aren't very important to them. And throughout history, Nazis have been responsible essentially for one of the greatest campaigns of terror to have ever wrecked the world. We had, of course, the archetypical Nazis back in the 1940s and 30s, where they did, let's just say, an oopsie, and left their country in ruin, tens of millions of dead, Holocaust perpetuated, gamer points scored, N-words expressed, Jesse Owens won the Olympics anyway, just a real big oopsie. But of course, Nazis are not just members of the Nazi political party, they are people who subscribe to the ideology of Nazism. And you can subscribe to that ideology now, you can do it now. You can believe in the things that the Nazis did back then and be a Nazi. You can even not be a white dude and be a Nazi, totally possible. Even back during World War II, there were non-white Nazis, believe it or not. There were Jewish Nazis, I know. There were black Nazis. There were Arabian Nazis. Hell, the Nazis declared the Japanese honorary Aryans because they got along so nicely with their respective but mutually incompatible ideologies of racial supremacy. The Japanese thought the Japanese were the master race, and Hitler, the Germanic, the Aryan, the Nordic, what have you, the whites. But they got along. They declared the Japanese honorary Aryans. That's kind of weird, right? Well, the reason for that is complicated and, you know, the ideology gets muddled sometimes with practical necessities like allying with wartime partners. But the fact remains nonetheless that Nazism and being in the Nazi in club is something that transcends the actual political party that died out in 1945. Now, with that being said, Nazis' reign of terror didn't really end in 1945. Since the end of the Second World War, there have been numerous far-right, either outwardly Nazi or Nazi-aligned groups that have risen up in damn near every country on Earth. Even non-white ones, incredibly enough. If you look hard enough, you can find neo-Nazi groups in pretty much every country. It's actually pretty crazy. Not every single one, but they're like all over the place, you know? And these people are pretty overwhelmingly responsible for large amounts of hate crimes, death, terrorism. They tend to have within their own ranks a preponderance of poor education, low IQ, just generally not the best people, you know, statistically speaking. And they lash out at others. Usually this is because they feel a sense of victimization, they feel disempowered in their life, they feel alienated, lost, and the only way they can reclaim their strength and glory is through the identification with something greater. In the Nazis' case, that is usually the white race, the Nordic race. And if you're non-white, man, you can go through some crazy mental gymnastics. I've talked with non-white Nazis before, you know? Some of these people believe in Nazism just shunted over to their particular ethnic group. So, like, there are black nationalists that basically are neo-Nazis, except they're black, and they want a black ethno-state in Africa, and so on and so forth. And same with Arabs and Latin people and what have you. But some of these people claim to recognize the superiority of the Aryan race, while not being Aryan. If you can ever find out for me what is going on in the head of a person who subscribes to an ideology that deems them inferior, like objectively, racially, intrinsically, let me know. I don't know what's going on with them. Best of luck to these guys, okay? I've met some of these people. I don't get it, you know? I really like being me. Maybe that's because I'm white. I don't know. Anyway, the point that I'm trying to get here with this is that Nazism has left a legacy of hatred, terror, destruction. These are not ideologies which can be moderated or meted, that can be sort of, tempered down, that good ideas can be found within. It is essentially, basically, ideologized terrorism. It's really no different functionally from, say, being an ISIS cell member. With the possible exception that the ISIS cell members tend to be brown and they wear different clothing and they follow a different god, the basic ideologies of Nazis and the ISIS are pretty similar, you know? Far-right radicalization stemming from a feeling of disempowerment as external powers and forces from within conspire to destroy your home and culture. Radicalizing predominantly young, frustrated men who feel as though a reactionary turn to hyper-traditionalism and the establishment of an ethnically unified theocratic state is the only way to secure the power of their people. It's basically the same. And if you saw an ISIS cell member walking around, or even not even an ISIS cell member, we don't even have to go to the organization. If you saw a card-carrying fan of ISIS walking around, someone who believes everything ISIS believes, death, cold, destroy the world, behead those who defy Allah or whatever, you know what you can do? I'm giving you the permission. I'm giving you the P-word pass. Here, I've got it here in my shirt. You can punch them in Minecraft, not in real life. Political violence is wrong. And the reason for that is because we believe in self-defense. In a physical sense, if someone comes towards me threateningly and wants to hurt me, I have a right to defend myself as soon as I can reasonably determine that they pose a threat to me. So if they just walk towards me, that's not enough. They walk towards me like this, we're getting pretty... If they walk towards me like this with a knife drawn, I can do basically anything I want to defend myself. If somebody points a gun at me, I have legal and moral justification to do essentially anything in my power to defend myself. Which is nice. I like that. Likewise, if people feel as though there's a group of people who pose a threat to them in an ideological sense, not just a threat to their wages, not just a threat to their political and business interests, but as a threat to them in the sense of they may literally be genocided if these people succeed in their aims. Well, if you want, in Minecraft. That is, of course, not my argument, but the argument that these people essentially would produce if pressed on it, assuming they've grounded their axioms enough. But this is an important distinction. I don't like the idea of people just hurting one another because they have differences in ideology. I don't. I genuinely do not. It should be recognized, however, that in a consequential sense, the consequences of allowing Nazis to become legitimized and become unopposed in a democratic system invariably leads to them gaining power and producing a system which hurts everyone. It's intrinsic to Nazism in a way that is not intrinsic to many other ideologies. Even communist. I mean, I'm a fucking anarchist. I'll say even like anarchists or communists or even fucking crazy far left people. We've had some pretty unsuccessful societies tied to our names in the past. But the lack of success in those societies, USSR, People's Republic of China, North Korea, these societies were not born of an intrinsic ideological goal of hatred and destruction, in the same way that Nazism is. That's pretty much what they go about, you know? So that is the argument these people would make. Let's go for it.
Punching a Nazi is the ethical choice, because people only become Nazis when they didn't get that urge punched out of them in childhood.
I don't agree with that.
Killer Mike caught wind of this remix and tweeted his appreciation, calling the video amazing. The one tweet started an interesting conversation, with many wondering why Mike was promoting hate or questioning why he'd call it amazing. Killer Mike isn't one to back down from any discussion and decided to stand his ground, explaining that he thinks it's okay for a white guy to knock the shit out of a Nazi. Mike continued, letting it be known that last I checked, Nazis were still on my granddad's up on sight list.
We literally had a huge world war. We had to tag up with other countries to beat the out of the Nazis because they were wiping out a race of people. And y'all like, yo, let's hear them out. Man, let's hear what they're talking about.
Let's see what they're about.
I know it's fun to do the mental gymnastics of deciding whether or not Plato or Socrates or Jaden Smith or whoever else in your Philosophy 101 text would agree with your logical conclusion that punching Nazis is bad because violence is not the answer, but no one cares.
No, whoa. I strongly disagree with this. The implication to what she just said is that there isn't a philosophical justification for punching Nazis. I strongly disagree with that contention. Yeah, Jaden Smith, noted philosophy king. I strongly disagree with that assertion. No, it's pretty simple, really. From a consequentialist perspective, you have to alienate certain groups to preserve a tolerant society. It's that simple. It's called the tolerance paradox. It's like 101 shit. Where's the comic? Here's the comic. Everyone has seen this. Cute little comic, right? Should a tolerant society tolerate intolerance? Which Nazism unquestionably is. Like, let's not get our knickers in a twist here. You want more tolerance? Respect my ideas. The answer is no. It's a paradox, but unlimited tolerance can lead to the extinction of tolerance. When we extend tolerance to those who are openly intolerant, the tolerant ones end up being destroyed, and tolerance with them. Any movement that preaches intolerance and persecution must be outside of the law. As paradoxical as it seems, defending tolerance requires to not tolerate the intolerance. Which I agree with completely. We want to preserve a society in which people with different political ideas can banter about and disagree and arrive at conclusions that may not be necessarily sort of hegemonically agreed with. And in order to keep that society as it is, we have to exclude some people.
Always good to knock out Nazis. Like, what the f? Like, why having a discussion about that?
Like I said, Nazis are totally fine for punching, especially when they've got a glass jaw.
All of this in spite of the fact that, according to Mr. Spencer is not a Nazi.
The leftist protesters,
What?
no, I'm not a neo-Nazi.
You like black people?
Well, why do you hate it?
sure.
Why do
You marry a black
neo-Nazis
woman?
love you if you're not a neo-Nazi?
Neo-Nazis don't love me, they kind of hate me, actually.
Following the KKK, neo-Nazi.
Those people don't like me,
Are you
to be
like
honest.
the hipster version of the neo-Nazi movement?
It's, Pepe's become kind of a symbol.
Nevertheless, the
Oh, damn, you're right. Wow, you're right, counter-arguments. He said he wasn't a Nazi. Do we need to do it again? Do we need to do it again? There we go.
I think it person to write our because I need
So mad!
these people. They don't do this to fucking me. We're gonna fucking ritualistically humiliate them. I am coming back here every fucking weekend if I have to. Like, this is never over. I win, they fucking lose. That's how the world fucking works. Little fucking kikes. They get ruled by people like me. Little fucking octoroons. My ancestors fucking enslaved those pieces of fucking shit.
So yeah, it turns out asking neo-Nazis directly whether or not they're Nazis is not actually a phenomenal sort of determining characteristic. Yeah, maybe he was just really mad that day. You know, who hasn't had a bad day and then accidentally screamed like a child about how he used to enslave blacks and Jews, and how his ancestors would have enslaved those pieces of shit? Who hasn't had those moments, you know?
Argument was made that we should all be allowed to punch a Nazi. The reasoning behind this argument is fairly straightforward. We ought to do harm to people who are evil. Nazis are evil, therefore injure them.
Incorrect. It's not because they're evil, it's because they're a danger. That's the difference. It has nothing to do with them being evil. It has to do with their capacity to cause harm. Nazism is as much a legitimate political ideology with the capacity to improve the world and society as the Black Plague or tuberculosis. It's not something to be treated with the same consideration you would afford other political ideologies. There's nothing good to be seen here. I don't give a fuck if it's evil. I care if it's harmful.
Before we address the reasoning itself, let's first entertain the potential consequences of this proposition. Punching a Nazi, or anyone for that matter, is likely going to discourage them from speaking publicly, but only by themselves.
I've seen this one before. I've seen this one. If you shame them for being neo-Nazis, then they'll just hide and be neo-Nazis quietly, and then they'll all ferment and build arguments without you being able to challenge them. This shit has been debunked multiple times in literal actual studies. When Nazis are deplatformed, when Nazis are shamed, when Nazis are disincentivized from participating in the public space, this leads to a sharp decrease in the popularity of Nazism and how many of them subscribe to that ideology and how many acts of terror they engage in. The reason for this is pretty simple. Watch this. Hey guys, Nazis want Nazis to win. So when Nazis are trying really hard to gain public legitimacy and participate in the public space and have big YouTube channels where they get to talk to lots of people, the fact that they want that means it's working for them. When they tell you, when you deplatform me, you only make me stronger, they're lying to you. Kind of like how Richard Spencer was lying about being a neo-Nazi. There have been actual studies by researchers done on the effects of deplatforming on hateful ideologies. And across the board, in every single instance, whenever you keep these people from engaging in the public space, it's good. It helps.
It would not discourage them from speaking in a group. Quite the contrary, it would likely encourage that. And once Nazis are traveling in large groups, punch a Nazi will have to be replaced with punch a bunch of Nazis,
sure,
which is probably not going to be half as satisfying as sucker punching one and then running away.
I like the implication here that the person who did that is like a coward. That's pretty funny to me. Also, yeah, so the first step is Nazi alone. The second step is Nazi in a group together in private. The third step is Nazis in a group together in public. What is this? Like, if you punch a single Nazi, they come back with more or something? The way you systemically delegitimize Nazism and disincentivize people from being Nazis is to hurt them every way you can. In public, shame and hurt them, throw shit at them. In private, ban their public spaces, quarantine or delete their subreddits, break up the websites that they're on, run FBI investigations on their programs. It's that simple. Do you really think that Nazism is harmed by Nazis going out into the public space and legitimizing their ideology by protesting? Do you think this hurts Nazis? Then why do they do it so much?
Providing an incentive for Nazis to function in large groups doesn't seem like a good idea, historically speaking. While even one Nazi speaking publicly...
Remember, guys, the Nazi Party in Germany came about because people punched individual Nazis on the street, and then they all went back to their house and came out with a political party. What the fuck is this? Isn't this channel supposed to be, like, not completely fucking brain dead? What the fuck am I watching right now? Is this like a brain dead channel? What am I supposed? The only legitimate argument against violence against Nazis is that isn't like civility politics, is optics. It makes you look bad, which it can often make you look bad. And I concede that. I agree with that. If you're engaging in violence against far-right groups in a way that delegitimizes your look and makes you look worse, that's bad.
Falls short of ideal for many people, assaulting them might make the situation worse in the long run. So as far as being pragmatic goes, this argument seems to be self-defeating.
Based on the syllogism that punching one Nazi makes them multiply? Like they're fucking tribbles? Like, what? Are they like slimes in a fucking MMORPG where you punch them and they split into two? Are they spores? What the fuck are we talking about right now?
But it isn't just problematic in a practical sense, it's problematic in an ethical sense as well. Striking a fellow human being for nothing more than their convictions is nothing new, but it's also not something that we celebrate.
Nah, suck my dick. We've been punching people for their convictions for a really fucking long time, okay? We don't have to fucking catch people in the act. When people are planning for like a fucking mass murder or something, if you catch somebody in like the midst of preparing for a school shooting, you don't have to have actually done anything. The capacity for harm against society is a metric in determining the ethics of using force against them. This civility politics, oh, the humanity, oh, Richard Spencer punching a human being for his opinions. You'll notice, by the way, anytime people play defense for this horse shit right here, anytime people like to play up this civility politics nonsense, they're never clear about what it is the other person actually wants, you know? They'll say, oh, you punch Richard Spencer for a difference in perspective, rather than, hey, you really want to do that, bro? You really want to punch Richard Spencer simply for wanting to create a white ethno-state, genociding or deporting hundreds of millions of non-whites, creating a fascist state ruled by an autocratic single party that uses fear and violence to control hundreds of millions and exert imperialistic control over other countries? You really want to punch somebody whose prominence in the physical space has directly correlated to an uptick in the number of hate crimes and a rise in the prominence and popularity of far-right militancy groups that have not only contributed predominantly to the general level of terrorist attacks that have occurred this year, eclipsing by far any other ideological predisposition, but are also starting to gain legitimacy in our broader public sphere, increasing the likelihood of policies being passed to bring about the aforementioned social system that Richard Spencer wants to create? You really want to punch a guy for that? They never do it. They never fucking do it. They never fucking do it. Every time it's difference of opinions. That's all they can say, because they know that if they actually describe the ideas of the neo-Nazi, they sound a little bit less sympathetic. It happens every time. All of the fucking cucky fake conservative deuterinos who defended Nick Fuentes did the exact same thing. They're like, oh, people just want to deplatform this real conservative because of his difference in opinions concerning conservatism, so on and so forth. Never, ever, ever are the differences in opinion explicitly described because you never want your audience to really know what's going on. Why isn't rhetoric enough to destroy Nazism rather than the terrorism you are advocating for? For one, it's not terrorism to punch a Nazi. I don't know what definition of terrorism you're residing on here, but that doesn't meet its qualification. For two, considering the fact that neo-Nazis, white nationalists, and alt-right groups are responsible for the vast majority of terrorist deaths over the past few years, I think it's reasonable to assume that people can believe that there is an act of self-defense, or at least an element of self-defense to that. For three, I don't give a fuck about just rhetoric. I don't stand just by rhetoric. I want to do whatever brings society to a better place. If rhetoric isn't enough, you can do more than that. Obviously, it's working for the Nazis because engaging in systemic violence against non-whites and Jews and synagogues and Muslims and what have you has been working out swimmingly for them in their public advocacy. It is terrorism, but I think it's fine to give terror to Nazis. No, that's as much terror. Nah, you can't say that's terrorism. Terrorism is like a planned act that is meant to spread a political message. Punching a Nazi on the street is often done in the context of counter-protesting. The use of intentional violence generally against civilians for political purposes. If you actually use terrorism to describe any form of violence for any political purpose, you can rope in essentially anything with that. In the practical sense, when people talk about terrorism, you're usually talking about planned or orchestrated events against a civilian population for the deliberate intent of spreading a political message. Isn't counter-protesting political? Yeah, so is every single riot that's ever happened at a protest an act of terrorism? I mean, if you're willing to go down that road, every single protest that ever turned violent is terroristic, then I don't know about that one. But this is where definitions get a little bit, they get a little bit clouded. Like, what's the semantic definition as opposed to what's like the practical definition, you know? All right, let's finish this horse shit.
Every time it's been done in the past, we've considered it to have been a tragic mistake.
What? Anytime violence happens, it's a tragic mistake?
Celebrate. Every time it's been done in the past, we've considered it to have been a tragic mistake.
What about every time we stop cults? What about every time we stop terrorist groups? What about every time we stop planning mass murderers? What about every time we stop foreign governments who are engaging in acts of genocide against their own people? Every time we engage in a war over ideological difference? World War II was also an instance of us engaging in violence over people with different principles, okay? You can't, every time violence happens. Hey, what's that Hitler quote? Hitler quote. Where's that Hitler quote? Here we go. Yep. From Snopes themselves. Hitler later said, after he took power, only one thing could have stopped us. If our adversaries had from the first day smashed with the utmost brutality the nucleus of our movement. Hitler himself said it after coming to power, that the only way he could have been stopped is if the liberals, and they were liberals in the Weimar Republic, had stomped him from the beginning. So, looking back on things, I would say that every weak-willed cuck-ass lib back in the Weimar Republic who used the same bad faith arguments that this person is now, that you shouldn't engage in violence against people with different ideological leanings, is themselves, in a way, responsible for the Holocaust and the deaths in World War II. Because everyone knew it. The lefties back then knew it. The lefties in Germany knew what was happening, and they fought against the Nazi Party before and after it took power. They recognized the threat Nazism posed to the world. But the libs, oh, they wrote their op-editorials. Oh, they made fun of them on the radio. Oh, they were so snarky and wise, but we shouldn't engage in violence against people with different ideological perspectives. And look how that turned out. I would say the consequences of not persecuting them for their ideological differences turned out to be a lot worse than whatever consequences could have arisen from them choosing to do so. Because that's what Nazism is. It's just a plague, but rather than spreading as a pathogen does through the blood or the lungs or the air, it's a plague that spreads through minds. Don't let that Selma March thing go. I don't actually know anything about the Selma March. What's this instance? Selma to Montgomery marches, 3 protest marches. Oh, this was during the Civil Rights Movement. Yeah, I read about this. Yeah, wasn't this when the police cracked down on them? I assume that when he refers to Selma March, he's referring to the police cracking down on the protesters. Not the other way around, like not violence against the police. Because the picture that he chose here was of a black man getting like held down and beaten by a police officer. Yeah, so I assume this is an instance of him criticizing the state's power.
Ironically, the same people who hate Nazis so much that they want to punch him are making the exact same ethical oops.
Oh, please do it. I'm ready.
Daisy that the Nazis themselves made. Again, this line of reasoning isn't anything new. Just swap out Nazis for Jews and bada bing, Kristallnacht.
Except, for one, it has nothing to do with whether they're evil, it has to do with whether they're harmful, and for two, just because you can make those claims doesn't mean you can justify them. Wow, it turns out that if we swap words to mean different things, then those sentences now have different meanings. Incredible, wow. Hey guys, murderers should be arrested. You want murderers to be arrested? Do you have any idea? You're making the same mistake the Nazis did. Just replace murderers with Jews. You want that? Is that what you want? Yeah, think about shit next time. Think about shit next time before you open your stupid fucking mouth. Oh yeah. Wait, what was that? Wait, rapists should go to prison? Rapists should go to prison! Do you have any idea what the Nazis stood for? Do you know who else went to prison? I mean, it's funny, but that's literally the argument that this Counterpoints channel is making. It's identical fucking argument, but that's okay. That's okay.
Isn't anything new. Just swap out Nazis for Jews and bada bing, Kristallnacht. Admittedly,
wait, fuck, I just realized.
New.
I realized if you swap out the word evil with bread pudding, then this also becomes incoherent. You're making the same ideological mistake as the Nazis. Harm those who are bread pudding. Nazis are bread pudding. Words mean nothing. You just keep the same number of words in the sentences and keep the fucking articles between the nouns, and you have synthesis.
Just swap out Nazis for Jews and bada bing, Kristallnacht. Admittedly, it is frustrating that we cannot unanimously agree on who is and isn't evil. Yes.
I love this. Look at this slimy juxtaposition. Look at this disagreement that's being presented as two equal and opposite both sides that must be criticized with equal fervor. Nazis are evil and Jews are evil. Damn. Well, you're right. Nice. If it weren't for the fact that I've seen this guy's videos before and some of them are a little bit more cogent, I would actually consider this to be Nazi sympathy. Nice. Where's the enlightened centrist perspective? The beautiful, the glorious society I want to live in is one in which no one can decide whether or not it is in fact Jewish people or genocide-loving fascists are evil. We can't decide. It's just, they're all opinions. And all opinions are worth the exact same amount of credence. Both sides, no matter what, fair and balanced.
For lack of a much better word, it's annoying. But as long...
Oh, it's annoying. That must suck for you. My apologies.
As long as that is the case, punching people who you think are evil is just going to open up Pandora's box.
Yeah, same with self-defense. If someone comes at you with a gun, who's to say whether or not they're evil? Maybe next time the person who comes up to mug you wants to punch you because they think you're evil. Again, nothing matters. All opinions are exactly the same. Nobody has to justify any of their points. We can just say things in words.
All anyone else needs to do is think that you're evil and you're next.
Damn. Well, Nazis already do that, though. Nazis are responsible for the vast majority of terrorist attacks over the past few years. White supremacist violence has skyrocketed past all other forms of terrorist activity to achieve the pinnacle of the pie chart of terrorist deaths. So Nazis are actually already doing that bit, except they don't punch, they use guns. Which maybe we could learn from.
But maybe the most unimpressive thing about this argument is the fact that violence doesn't change hearts and minds. It never has. The best you can get with intimidation is a performance. The other side will simply pretend that they agree with you.
Wrong! God, this is so fucking stupid. Holy shit. If you make Nazis scared to go into the public space, they'll stop going into the public space. Look at what happened with the Ku Klux Klan in certain districts after the end of the civil rights protests, after segregation was made illegal. Look at what happened with fucking neo-Nazis in Germany after the fall of of the Nazi order. You know, in all instances, every single time, disincentivizing people from acting the way that they do increases the likelihood that they will not act in the way that they do. Yeah, they might lie and dog whistle about it, so get better at reading dog whistles. The alternative is to just let them bowl over your society.
They still won't, only now you just won't know that. And that doesn't really count.
Well, you wouldn't know that because you're like fucking fridge temp IQ. Any sufficiently talented and educated person can understand the dog whistles they throw out.
The only way to change somebody's mind is with an argument. So
wrong! Oh yeah, nice. That's what we're trying to do here. We don't give a fuck about changing people's minds. We give about getting them out of the public space. People can't become Nazis if Nazis don't find them and radicalize them in the first place. Holy shit, this is the most dumb fuck lib argument. This is what people say when they say that libs will side with Nazis over leftists. Because this vacuous appeal to civility, this fallacious appeal to like mind changing as the only form of political discourse is how you lose societies to the far right. It's extraordinary. The consequence of disincentivizing people from being Nazis by terrorizing them is that there are fewer Nazis who feel less comfortable engaging in public advocacy, and that people who aren't Nazis feel more comfortable dismissing their opinions. This is only good.
So rather than punching a Nazi, try arguing with a Nazi instead. It might prove to be a waste of time, but punching them instead would be self-defeating, ineffectual, unethical, and illegal. It's illegal.
No one cares about the legal argument here. Hey, as somebody who literally has spent his career arguing with Nazis, I've got some advice for you. Don't. It's a waste of time. They're all subhuman degenerates. They have no fucking IQ. They're not capable of forming cogent points because they don't feel any obligation to be honest enough to make those points in the first place. Every argument with a Nazi is 3 hours of them backpedaling off their initial euphemisms until you finally get them to nail down their perspective. Often their perspective will be self-contradictory. It doesn't matter to them. They don't care about arguing. They care about wasting your time and getting attention on the public stage. Arguing with Nazis should only be done if you are A, making money from it, or B, so talented in debate that you can cut through their horseshit faster than the average person can and expose them to a public audience as a as a fallacious, habitually lying piece of shit who wants to build an ethno-state. Okay, that's it. That's the only reason. That's literally the only reason. But if you want to prevent the rise of Nazism in your country, which we are literally experiencing right now, you have to consider the possibility that limiting yourself to the same tools that didn't work for the Weimar Republic might not be the best option for you either. Richard Spencer, the fella who got decked in that there video, Richard Spencer has recently been extremely discouraged from engaging in any kind of political advocacy. Richard Spencer has been showing up to conferences and to auditorium presentations that have had a few dozen people attending. He looks tired, old, and he's gained weight. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it could be a sign of stress eating. He's openly said that he no longer enjoys advocating for his politics anymore. And the reason why? Because Antifa and counter-protesters were there at every single one of his events to scream, to shout, to throw things. Milo Yiannopoulos, previously so huge she was like valued at millions, is now millions in debt, worthless, irrelevant, exists only on Telegram, complaining that his 1,000 subscribers is not capable of keeping his bills paid. Black Pigeon Speaks, gone off YouTube. James Alsop, gone off YouTube. We didn't have to argue with these people. We don't argue with the plague. They're just harmful. They're not meant to be argued with, nor do they want to argue with you. They just want to gain power until they have sufficient public support to begin enacting their policies. And if you don't want that to happen, you have to be in favor of whatever actions it takes to keep them from invoking those policies. It's that simple. If you in this... Oh, wait, is Black Pigeon... Did I misspeak with Black Pigeon Speaks? Is Black Pigeon Speaks still around? Black Pigeon Speaks got banned, didn't he? Or maybe he got reinstated, the channel? Oh, no, he's still around. Okay. The channel must have gotten reinstated. Not Black Pigeon Speaks, then. My apologies. We'll get there one day. I know you're all disappointed now. I remember reading that he had been banned, but I guess he was brought back. Oh yeah, Medicare recently got knocked off Patreon. Nice. Medicare is also a Nazi, you know? These aren't arguments. These are recognitions that these people exist to spread harm. They're every bit as harmful, if not more harmful to society at large, than somebody advocating for bomb-making techniques, or somebody advocating for the best way to shoot up a school. Do you think that would last long on YouTube? Someone who talks about, well, you see, based on the studies that I've read, you know, children tend to duck down in this way. So if you fire a spray underneath the desk covers, you can kill far more people than if you fired from above. Like, do you think that would last long on YouTube? I sincerely doubt it. But statistically speaking, I would be willing to bet that a video from one of those big neo-Nazi types does significantly more harm to the public discourse than any one such video that I just described ever could.
You're not allowed to do that. It's against the law.
Wait, Mr. Medicare is far right, but is he a Nazi? Mr. Medicare is one of those like drama mongerers who's not particularly clear in his particular positions. But every time somebody brings up Medicare to me, they are a Nazi. Like I'll see people like retweet Medicare on Twitter in between like Jewish question posts. I went to one of Medicare's live stream once. He got donated like $50 from somebody named like the Goyim Sheckelstein, talking about Jews controlling immigration. The chat was trying to spell the N-word in single cap letters. And the little echo signs were being used in like every other comment. So as the famous adage says, what do we call a Nazi sympathizer? Or in this particular case, what do we call somebody who is loved by Nazis, has a Nazi audience, and aligns completely with Nazi politics while only producing content that affirms the worldview of neo-Nazis? What do we call those people? What's the term? It's you guys are never going to spell it in caps. There's no way. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. You're never going to do it, guys. I mean, I admire the attempt. I don't know why there was a J in there. There's a P. I see an R now. We can try. Oh, well. Good luck. A Q. I'm going to go over donations. I hated that video and I'm not happy that I saw it.